Welcome back to the WalterPicks Fantasy Football Show. Today we're diving into the NFC East, starting with the Dallas Cowboys. I'm excited to kick this one off, guys, because I've been grinding for the WalterPicks app, building the first version ever of a draft guide for the subscribers in the WalterPicks app. And a part of that guide is highlighting what I believe are some of the most underrated offseason changes. Not the offseason changes that aren't getting any attention. Certainly some of them are, but they're going underrated by the fantasy community. And one of the three stories I highlight there is the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, they're going from one of the worst situations last year to a massively improved situation this year. Last year, Dak Prescott, he suffers a season-ending torn hamstring in his 8th game of the year. In his full 7 games before that, he had below 14 points just twice, despite he didn't have a single game with more than 3 passing touchdowns, something that he did 7 of his final 12 games the previous season. So down the stretch in 2023, over half of Dak Prescott's games, he threw over 3 passing touchdowns. Last year, in the 7 full games that he had, didn't do it a single time, still was clearing 14 points, though, in most of those games. Now, the massively improved situation this year. Dak's back to full health. By all reports, going to be ready to go day 1 of training camp, which starts this week. And the Cowboys have an actual wide receiver too. I want to put you guys on the spot here for a second. Who do you think led? Who do you think was the wide receiver 2 in terms of receiving yards, wide receiver receiving yards for the Cowboys last season? Can you guys get this? After CeeDee Lamb, of course. Who was the wide receiver 2 for the Cowboys last season?
I'll take a guess and say Jalen Tolbert.
That is correct. It was Jalen Tolbert.
Let's go.
Thank you, Avery, because I was going to say something ridiculous.
and when I did, I did have to go and double check who it was, because Brandon Cooks was a close third, but it was one of the worst wide receiver 2 situations in the NFL. Just to put this in context, so obviously the Cowboys, they get George Pickens in a trade this offseason. Jalen Tolbert, 1.2 yards per route run for Jalen Tolbert over the last 2 seasons, and he's run almost 1,000 routes, so pretty good sample size there. George Pickens, he's run a similar number of routes too. He's up at 2.2 yards per route run the last 2 seasons, so almost twice as efficient as Jalen Tolbert. This is definitely the best receiving talent Dak's ever played with, and this is definitely the best quarterback George Pickens has ever played with. So I definitely don't want to underrate this passing attack. On top of that, you look at the running back room on this team. We're projecting Javonte Williams as the running back 1. He's coming off not his most efficient season. And Jaden Blue, they drafted in I believe the 5th or 6th round of the NFL draft. There's already been some somewhat concerning reports about how bought in he is and his work ethic. And then they also have Miles Sanders, who they got from the Panthers. He's been sort of hopping around the league for a while now, being a running back 2, running back 3, wherever he lands. Very unlikely he becomes a league winner. It doesn't really seem to me like there's a league winning path to upside in this running back room. This team might lead the league in passing attempts. They've been near the top in passing attempts over expectation with Dak over the last 2 years, which leads me to be even more bullish on Dak, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and then they have Jake Ferguson here as well. Just to run through some of the quick numbers from last season, where these guys are getting drafted this season before we dive into it. The running backs, they're really not getting drafted high at all. These are typically, you're going to find the last starting running back drafted in your draft, it might come from the Cowboys. That's going to be Javonte Williams. He's going as running back 34. He finished as running back 39 last season with 9.2 points per game. Jaden Blue, he might go undrafted in some home leagues. Right now he's getting drafted around running back 50, running back 40. We have him ranked at running back 50. We're a little bit ahead on Javonte here in the projections, but I'm still not very excited to click on him because there's just no ceiling. We're pretty behind on Jaden Blue. Jaden Blue, my favorite comp for him is Nyheim Hines. He is a good receiving back. I think he's got a little bit more explosive potential than Hines, but these early reports I definitely am a little bit concerned about, and I want to see how much he gets rotated in with the ones, if at all. This is a type of guy that wouldn't be shocking to see him play special teams and not have much of a role in year 1. CeeDee Lamb, we talked about him already on the show when we talked about Justin Jefferson. We have CeeDee Lamb ranked ahead of Justin Jefferson just slightly in the WalterPicks app. The more I think about it, the more I agree with that ranking. I think it's close, but just the safety of this offense, the safety of Dak versus J.J. McCarthy, the safety of the pass volume here feels really, really good. He was the wide receiver 1 in 2023. He was at 17.9 points per game last year. And again, he played half the season without Dak Prescott. He had absolutely no one taking the pressure off of him. This feels eerily similar to the Bengals situation here, where CeeDee Lamb's the Jamar Chase, George Pickens is the T. Higgins, and both these guys can have wide receiver 1 weeks and top 10 wide receiver seasons. On to George Pickens. He had 12.6 points per game last year with really not a great quarterback situation. We have him ranked up at wide receiver 23 this season. That was wide receiver 37. He finished last year. He's getting drafted at wide receiver 28 now. So he's getting moved up 9 spots from where he finished last year, and arguably got the biggest quarterback upgrade of the entire offseason. We're well ahead of his ADP there. He doesn't need massive volume to be a really good fantasy asset. I think he can be like a Jameson Williams plus in this type of role. But I think there could actually be pretty big volume here too. I think the volume could be pretty consistent. And then lastly, Jake Ferguson. He was only at 7.8 points per game. He's mentioned in my draft guide as well. Didn't score a single touchdown last season. 0% touchdown rate for Jake Ferguson. He finished as tight end 21. Pretty brutal. We got him a little ahead of that, tight end 19. He's getting drafted, though, a little above where we have him ranked right now, tight end 15, tight end 14. Definitely will score some touchdowns this season. Third in the pecking order now, but should still have a role. And then Brandon Aubrey feels just quickly worth mentioning. He's getting drafted as the first kicker in almost every draft. He was the kicker 4 last year. We do have him as the kicker 1 right now for the kicker people. I want to start off with Dak Prescott and how you guys are viewing him in drafts. For me, if I'm not going to get one of the Elite 4, and I'm warming up to Joe Burrow a tiny bit, but at his cost, I probably won't have any of him. But like to me, if I'm just going to pass on Joe Burrow, I'll just take Dak 3 or 4 rounds later and get a very, very similar archetype of player who we've seen be an MVP caliber guy. And he's available usually after the first 12 quarterbacks are off the board. Are you guys cool taking Dak as a late round quarterback strategy this season? Seth, how are you feeling about Dak Prescott for fantasy?
Yeah, I'm certainly drafting a lot of Dak this year. I mean, I love CeeDee Lamb, so I love George Pickens. I mean, we talked a little bit about the upside of this offense, and you said it really how I like to look at it as well, like a Bengals light,
Yeah.
And having these amazing receivers and having so much pass volume for a guy you can get in like the 12th, 13th, 14th round. He's definitely someone that I'm taking off the board this year, especially if I grab one of his wide receivers earlier on, get a slight boost from that stack value.
This is a really easy situation for me to stack. Like Seth was saying, you can get Dak extremely late. You could get CD with one of your first picks, or you could get George Pickens very late in drafts, which we'll talk about him more later. I like Dak Prescott. If you've been around any of the TikToks that we've been making on the main WalterPicks account or the Commanders WalterPicks account, I've been saying he's one of my favorite late round targets. A lot of people see the injuries and he's going a lot later than he had last year because he didn't finish the season high. He didn't finish high in fantasy points per game because he didn't have the opportunity. He is projected to have the second highest pass volume in the entire NFL behind Joe Burrow. I like it. That means fantasy points for me. I think he's going way too low as far as sleeper ADP QB 16. That's league winning right there for me.
Yeah, look, you look at the historical production too. You don't need to do much stretching here to see it. He's had at least 17 points per game every single season of his career, except for last year, which I think he actually might have been up closer to 17 if we took out that game where he got hurt. And you look back to 2019, he's had 4 seasons over 20 fantasy points per game. To get there without the rushing, you need massive volume and you need a lot of touchdowns. And you just look at the running back depth chart here. I'm not convinced they're going to be able to score rushing touchdowns. They weren't able to score rushing touchdowns last season. They had the lowest rushing touchdown rate in the NFL. It was brutal. I think we were looking at this when trying to project these running backs, and multiple of the running backs on this team last year were under 1% touchdown rate. I mean, they don't run in the red zone, and when they do, it doesn't work. But they do have the ability, obviously, to throw in the touchdown. So yeah, and I agree with the stacking. Definitely a consolidated target share, high pass volume, perfect for the stacks. I definitely agree with that. The other note here that we didn't mention, no Mike McCarthy on the Cowboys anymore. They got a new offensive coordinator in town. I believe it's Schottenheimer is the OC now. I don't expect that to be a negative thing. I'm not so bullish on the new OC, but I'm very pleased to not have to deal with Mike McCarthy anymore, who I've lost faith in a long, long time ago, back in his Packers days. The second we saw Mike McCarthy without Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, it's pretty clear who was carrying the weight there. But let's go on to the running backs, because I'm curious who, if any of these guys you're targeting. Again, just to run through the ADPs, it's not like they're super expensive. Javonte Williams, he's getting drafted on underdog at running back 41. It seems like it's a little steeper on the ESPN Yahoo sleeper platforms around running back 35. We're at running back 34. Jaden Blue is, I believe, the next guy on all the platforms ADP wise. Running back 41 on sleeper. We're back at running back 49. Miles Sanders is going undrafted in every single draft right now, and I think we have him in the running back 60 range. Is there any of these three running backs that you guys will take stabs on at any points of your draft? Avery, I'll let you go first with this one. Any of these running backs you feel good about?
You look at the ADPs, you see Javonte going past the top 35 running backs, Jaden Blue even lower, and you think maybe I guess it's worth it. Somebody has to do something, right? I just don't love it. I don't love either of these running backs. I was a little bit of a believer in Jaden Blue until the reports came out saying that he's lazy. I don't like that about any player. When I hear that, I'm not excited to draft in fantasy. And Javonte Williams is not efficient. 3.6 yards per carry last year is not going to get it done. Yeah, I don't find myself drafting any of them. They don't have league winning upside. So why not take a really late flyer on somebody else that might be able to return that value?
Well, I look at Javonte Williams with the ADP and think somebody has to do something. That's what I think, and I know that's the kind of opposite from you, Avery. But I'm drafting some Javonte Williams. If you look at his snap share last season, he averaged 9.6 or 9.2 points per game. He hovered around 50 to 55% snap percentage, which that's half the game. So if he can get a little bit more than that, maybe he can get into that 11-12 range. And the other thing I like about him is he was really volatile, and the volatility gave us some huge weeks as well. So for someone that you can get very late, that did also have some amazing weeks last year, I think it's a good backup if you have injuries, you got a bye week, and who knows, maybe he'll turn out to do a little bit better than we're expecting. It's just like it could win you your league if he actually gets the majority of the carries. If Miles Sanders isn't good and Jaden Blue isn't good, this offense is going to score enough points that I think it's worth a shot later on in your draft.
Yeah, and I'll note on the Jaden Blue news, this is the time of year we get news, and some of it's just not news. It's just literally people's opinions being reported as news. It's hard to know if this Jaden Blue one is that. To me, this Jaden Blue news is either absolutely nothing or it's really, really bad. Like it's one of those two. It's probably not in the middle for a guy that was picked as late as he was picked. And yeah, I think if you're gonna take someone, it kind of has to be Javonte Williams. He at least has shown some receiving ability too, which I do want in my running backs in fantasy. He was fifth in the NFL in running backs and targets, sixth in target share. He actually had, I think, the sixth most receptions last year, over 50 catches. And when I'm drafting zero running back teams, one of the three things I'm looking for in running backs is a story you can tell about a guy getting more than 50 catches. And very few guys did it. I think only 6 running backs did it last season. One of them was Javonte Williams. That being said, even with all that volume, 9.3 fantasy points per game. So like it's hard for me to get too excited, but I could squint and see it. If this offense ends up being as good as it was. It was Rico Dowdle, by the way, that was under a 1% touchdown rate last year, 0.9%. And that Javonte Williams receiving stuff, I think it gets me more excited about the Broncos running backs, honestly, and just that scheme than Javonte being this epic pass catcher. But at least he's shown the ability to catch passes. But yeah, I lean towards being out. I just don't see a real league winning ceiling with him. To me, he's like a stopgap guy maybe you could trust in the first month of the season as you wait for some rookie running backs to hit, which isn't the worst thing in a zero running back strategy. Let's move on to the receivers, though. We've all had some time, I think, to think about it at this point, whether we agree or disagree with our ranking in the WalterPicks app that has Lamb just slightly ahead of Justin Jefferson. I think I already said, I think I'm on board. It's definitely close. I don't feel great passing on Justin Jefferson in drafts, but I think that CeeDee Lamb is a bit safer with a similar ceiling. And I've been very aggressive going after George Pickens as well, like I mentioned at the top. I think it's just it's not like people aren't aware of the change, but it just feels like it's getting underrated. Not quite to the level of Saquon last year, where Saquon was going from an absolutely horrible situation to obviously a really great situation. He still was sliding to the back end of the first round. I don't think it's quite that extreme, but it's close for me with George Pickens. Yeah, these are two receivers I feel great targeting where they're getting drafted. Pickens like round 5, round 6. CeeDee Lamb obviously with the top 5 pick. But how are you guys approaching these two receivers? Are you as bullish as me, Seth, on CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens?
Definitely on CeeDee Lamb, for sure. Justin Jefferson for me may move all the way back to pick 6 because I'm just liking Jahmyr Gibbs more and more every day, every time I'm doing research. But George Pickens was interesting because I love everything about him, But when I'm doing mock drafts, he doesn't end up on a lot of my teams. And a lot of it has to do with the way players are laid out this year. When you get into rounds, he's a round 5 guy. You get in round 6, 7, 8, 9. There are so many good receivers. Ricky Pearsall, Stephon Diggs. I like Jacoby Myers. You can get Jerry Jeudy. There are so many good receivers. And the running backs there, it just feels such a dart throw with the running backs at that range. When you're getting true number 1 wide receivers, you're getting guys that should see a 23 to even 27% target share. So he's actually not ending up on a lot of my teams in favor of guys like David Montgomery, James Conner, maybe RJ Harvey, maybe even Travion Henderson. So even though he's a guy I love, I haven't drafted him a ton.
How about you, Avery? You're going to split the difference here.
Yeah, I think CeeDee Lamb inside the top 3 wide receivers makes sense. I could get behind taking him over Justin Jefferson. They both have somewhat similar red flags. Justin Jefferson, obviously, with a quote unquote rookie in JJ McCarthy, and then CeeDee Lamb has more target competition with George Pickens. But if Dak Prescott can stay fully healthy, and that's not something that we can predict or say he won't, that's fine with me. And when I look at George Pickens, I like George Pickens. I agree with Sam in the fact that he's getting drafted very late for what he is. Dak Prescott, when he was healthy last year, was 11th in deep ball attempts per game. George Pickens is top 5 in air yards. Like, that's exactly what he does. He goes deep. He runs deep routes. I think he can succeed a lot in this offense. I do agree with what Seth is saying about like roster construction for your team. So far in ADPs and so far this year, I think starting a little bit more running back heavy is stronger because that drop off is real. But I'm definitely not avoiding George Pickens. And I think he doesn't need a ton of targets to be a great wide receiver and outperform an ADP of wide receiver 28 on Sleeper. I agree more with WalterPicks rank more towards the top 25 wide receivers.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to pass on Henderson or RJ Harvey. And I feel like in the season long drafts, I've been able to push at least the ones I've done so far and the ADPs I'm seeing, you're able to push those guys to round 6, sometimes even round 7 in a 12 team league. I'm comfortable taking Pickens in round 5, trying to push that one more round. And I do often start running back heavy in the first 3 rounds as well. So yeah, looking at the guys getting drafted around George Pickens right now, Jalen Waddle, I think, is in a similar tier. I would be comfortable even saying Calvin Ridley could get in that tier too. Those are 2 receivers taken shortly after him. Travis Hunter is getting taken right around the same time as George Pickens. I would much rather the safety of George Pickens there. Kenneth Walker, Chuba Hubbard, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, James Conner. Give me George Pickens over every single one of those guys very, very easily. I think the ceiling story is better for him than all those running backs who maybe give you somewhat of a floor. But at this point in my draft, I've already gotten at least 1, if not 2 running backs that are giving me a better floor, a better ceiling than all those guys. George Pickens is a discount T. Higgins. You can get T. Higgins in round 3, who we talked about, I think, on the last episode, could literally be a top 10 wide receiver, was a top 10 wide receiver last year in points per game. Then you can run it back and get George Pickens, who also could be a top 10 wide receiver in points per game. And I think Pickens might be a little bit more volatile than T. Higgins, where you get a 30-point game and then a 7-point game, and you just kind of have to struggle through that a little bit in season long. I do have a little bit of start-sit headache fear with George Pickens, since we don't exactly know what the target share is going to look like. But if he gets anywhere near what we're projecting, which is 23%, we're only projecting a 23% target share right now for George Pickens. If he gets anywhere above that, he's going to finish as a top 20 wide receiver. We have him ranked as wide receiver 23 right now with that target share. Yeah, so I think we're being a little bit cautious, honestly, with the target share there. When you look at the rest of the wide receiver depth chart, it is then Jalen Tolbert, who honestly was a little bit better last season than I even would have expected fantasy point wise. This is also part of the reason I feel pretty good. We just talked about the 1.2 to 2.2 yards per route run. We saw a 21-point game from Jalen Tolbert last season. When Dak was playing, he actually had 3 games over 13 points. George Pickens could double these numbers, and it wouldn't be very shocking. Even without Dak Prescott, we saw plenty of games over 10 points in this role from Jalen Tolbert, who's definitely not the guy that we expect to be super efficient. The last guy to hit on here on this team is Jake Ferguson. I've seen a lot of love for Jake Ferguson out there in the fantasy streets. I've seen a lot of people fading him as well. It seems like kind of randomly a bit polarizing of a tight end. I think I'm somewhere in the middle here. He's going to score touchdowns this season. I think this team passes a lot. That helps him as well. I don't think George Pickens is necessarily a bad thing for him. We're projecting him still for a 16% target share, pretty firmly the number 3 receiving option in an offense that could throw a ton. So yeah, I don't hate him if I punt tight end. We're a little bit behind his ADP, I believe, right now in our rank. Got him ranked at tight end 19, like a few spots behind. It's really bunched together though here in this tight end range. I don't hate him at all, but not a guy I'm super excited to draft either. Only averaged 8 points per game last year, but again, no touchdowns and half the season without Dak. Is Jake Ferguson a late round tight end you guys are interested in? Avery, how are you approaching Ferg?
Jake Ferguson to me is a guy that I am targeting. I'm not 100% happy if he's my starting tight end. Again, if you punt tight end and you go late, you're gonna have to take two tight ends, in my opinion, in the draft just to make up for that value that you could be losing. But again, you look at Jake Ferguson, he had 0 touchdowns last year. He was not great without Dak. Dak is healthy now. They're gonna be top 3 in passing attempts. There's gonna be a couple touchdowns. And again, he finishes a tight end 21 last year. Like that is really, really bad. Add in those touchdowns, add in a healthy Dak. I think it's perfectly fine taking him at his ADP that low.
How about you, Seth?
Yeah, I've been doing mock drafts and the tight ends just disappear right before Jake Ferguson comes off the board. Like you have to grab one or they're just all gone. And then it's a little bit of panic set in when I was doing a mock draft yesterday and he was like the best option available. But I do think there's a path. I mean, you think about, you got George Pickens. He's someone that when he plays for the Steelers, he's getting major attention from the defense. You got CeeDee Lamb, you got to give major attention from the defense. And then you got some pass catching running backs, so you're going to have to monitor as well. I think that makes Jake Ferguson a pretty difficult assignment on defense. So I do see a path where he could be a very, very startable guy, at least top 12. So if you get stuck, I think it's fine. I did look at Goddard. I did look at Ertz as well. I don't think he really stands out of that tier for me. But I do think there's a path, of course, with those being older tight ends for him to actually have a bit of a breakout season. So if you get stuck, there's some hope if you do have to take Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, I would argue that his ceiling's higher than Zach Ertz, maybe kind of similar to Goddard, potentially a bit higher. And just looking back quickly at his game logs in these first 7 games that Dak played, no touchdowns, still finishes a top 8 tight end 3 weeks in a row, week 3, 4, 5. Like he was getting 6 catches, 7 catches, 6 catches in all those games. If the touchdowns come, like he could be a top 5 tight end. It is definitely possible. I think that this is part of the reason I'm pretty elite tight end or bust. And I've honestly been warming up a lot to Trey McBride in the second round when I go through these season-long drafts, because there's just such a clear tier break between those top 3. And I think there's a pretty good argument for McBride at 1. But nonetheless, every tight end after that, to me, there's like a long list of guys that you could tell a story that could be a top 5 tight end this season. And I think you could tell a story like that for Jake Ferguson. We've never seen it from him. His best season was actually, I don't have it in front of me here, but yeah, I think we've seen 15-point games from him without touchdowns with Dak Prescott in this offense. So if the touchdowns come, we could see a usable season. But yeah, I'm not too excited still to take him as the third pass catching option in this offense. And it's also possible, even though touchdown regression will come, he might just not be an elite touchdown scorer compared to CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens too. So you've got to factor some of that into with the regression stuff of like, why wasn't he scoring touchdowns? Well, CeeDee Lamb was getting all of the red zone targets, and that might not change. So that is definitely a reason for caution for me. All right, let's go quickly to get it on the record. Draft or pass? Are you guys drafting or passing Dak Prescott as QB 16 cost on Sleeper? I'm going to go with a firm draft there at that cost.
Draft for me.
Easy draft.
All right, how about Javonte Williams at his running back 35 cost in drafts? I'm going to go pass here at this point in the draft. I'm looking more for upside. Hopefully don't need to squeeze Javonte into my starting lineup. So I'm going to go with a pass here on Javonte Williams. How about you, Seth?
I'm going to go with a draft. I think that the risk is relatively low this late, and I do like the upside. So he could end up on some of my teams this year.
And I'm taking the pass. I hope I draft my fantasy team good enough to where I don't have to deal with Javonte Williams.
That felt like a shot. That felt like a shot, but that's all right.
I feel like he's pretty similar to what Rico Dowdle was last year, but he just needs to get better than that 1% touchdown rate. And how about Jaden Blue? This is later in drafts. As a last round pick, we'll say, are you drafting or passing on Jaden Blue? I'm going to lean towards pass right now. The recent report does have me just a tiny bit spooked. Like I said, it's either going to be nothing or I think pretty bad. But yeah, I'm passing right now on Jaden Blue in the last round. How about you, Avery?
I'll take him. Again, I don't like the news that he may or may not be lazy. We'll see if that's true, but I hope it's not true.
I also hope it's not true because I'll draft him as well. If I get Javonte, I don't think I'm drafting him without Javonte, but if I have both Cowboys running backs, it just feels like, like Avery said earlier, maybe I'm the sheep on this one, but it feels like someone a Dallas Cowboys running back has to be startable with the amount of points I think they're going to score this year. So I'd like to have both, and then I can maybe do a drop if whatever player's not getting enough action.
Yeah, this is the type of backfield too that I'm totally comfortable fully avoiding. I don't know if there will be a workhorse in this backfield, and I honestly think it's pretty sneakily like Miles Sanders might have a very real role here. He hasn't been good in quite some time, but he could easily beat out Jaden Blue and be in some sort of timeshare with Javonte Williams. Wouldn't shock me at all. And he's never going to be a guy we feel comfortable starting in fantasy. So he might be a real thorn in all fantasy manager side this season just by getting some volume. I think we'll start with CeeDee Lamb. We're going to do this one, CeeDee Lamb over Justin Jefferson. So with a top 4 pick in fantasy, are we drafting or passing on CeeDee Lamb? And I'm going to go with draft here with CeeDee Lamb, though I will say in most of my prep for my high stakes leagues, I'm leaning running back more than receiver in these early rounds. I much prefer getting Saquon and Bijan over CeeDee Lamb personally. And I think you could make a pretty good argument for Gibbs. And I'll probably make a pretty good argument for McCaffrey too when we get there. I know not many people are going to be willing to do that. But I might be in some of these leagues that skew really running back heavy that I'm a part of. But I'm comfortable taking Lamb over Jefferson. So I'm going to say draft here with CeeDee Lamb. Seth, how about you?
Yeah, I'm super comfortable. Exact reasons you said. Dak versus McCarthy. I'll take Dak all day. So I'm going with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, and I agree with what Sam and Seth said about taking the running backs early. I like that strategy, but CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, they seem pretty close to me. Whichever one your heart desires, I like it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. And then I think we're slightly split on George Pickens, but I'm definitely drafting George Pickens. I do not want to underestimate the quarterbacks that George Pickens has played with, the Kenny Pickett's, the Russell Wilsons of the world, these low pass volume, slow offenses to potentially the offense that's going to lead the NFL in pass attempts with a quarterback that has played an MVP caliber level. Massive, massive, massive jump here. I'm definitely drafting George Pickens with a decent amount of confidence this year. For me, Avery, are you drafting or passing on George Pickens?
Yeah, again, with the pass volume this team is going to get, we're also getting regular season Dak Prescott. This isn't playoff Dak Prescott. So give me George Pickens.
And for me, he's still a draft. I mean, I'm drafting him. I want him on every single one of my teams. I think like what another thing Avery said earlier, I hope I draft well enough that I can take him in that 5th round. Right. And I have some running backs. So that's just my biggest worry as I get to round 7. It's like my running backs are so terrible. And George Pickens is in that range, but I'd love to have him on at all of my teams.
And then Jake Ferguson, I think I'm going to, after talking through it today and looking more at how he produced with Dak last season, I think I'll call him a draft. Right now he's going tight end 16 on Underdog. I think he's around there on Sleeper as well. So as long as I'm getting him at that cost, I punt tight end, maybe a decent second tight end too to pair with Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland. If you snag one of those guys a bit earlier, I think that's totally reasonable. And I'm pro the late round draft, the late round tight end strategy this year. So I'm going to say draft with Jake Ferguson. Seth, are you drafting or passing with Jake Fergo?
I am drafting. I actually did the exact same strategy that you mentioned yesterday in a mock draft where I got Tyler Warren and then I grabbed Jake Ferguson a little bit later just so I can have a vet to start the season just in case.
I hate to be the guy that says draft all of them, but the pass volume is there. I'm taking Jake Ferguson. Not super excited if he's my number 1 tight end, but with what Sam and Seth said, if you're taking your first tight end that late, you got to double up.
Yeah, no, I like it. The only thing I'll add here at the end is when it comes to stacking, I really prefer just the single stack, either Dak with Pickens, Dak with Lamb, even if you're going to do Dak with Jake Ferguson. I think in season long, you get into some pretty dangerous territory and you start double stacking teams. And then all of a sudden, one injury to Dak, your whole team is torched. Like there's a lot of upside that comes with it, but there's a lot of risk in the correlated bet there as well that you just don't need to take. So I would be careful, even as bullish as we all were here on the Cowboys, to double stack, but really compelling team to single stack, especially with Lamb